ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। First and foremost, I offer my humble pranams at the divine lotus feet of our founder chancellor, Sri Madhusudan Sai, respected Ricky sir, uh, and loving students. Many a times, the corridors of various institutions, what gets discussed is whether students are getting good placements, whether students are getting good grades, or maybe some 20 to 30% of discussion on research and innovation. But what makes Sri Sathya Sai University for Human Excellence a unique institution, a game-changing institution, is that all of us are fortunate to discuss on human values, practice of human values, and also thoughts or getting into a dialogue where we want to build an equitable societies. So these make such discussions, such dialogues makes our university very noble and our corridors of our university very special. And as a students and also as a staff, we are very fortunate that for past 3 years we are consistently having this dialogue with various speakers from different walks of life across the globe on translating the wisdom into an action. We have many, like in the world at present, many speakers speak on compassion, speak on love, speak on service. But One World, One Family Foundation and Sathya Sai University for Human Excellence, I can say that we are pioneering in converting, in translating this compassion into actionable compassion, where best versions of human beings are revealed, best versions of human beings are discovered among the masses. And as a mass movement, we stand for the society, we stand for the underprivileged and underserved sections of the society as one world and one family. So this is the greatness of this university, and we are very thankful that, and I would say it's my privilege to introduce today's speaker for our words of wisdom session, Dr. Ricky Husaini, joining us from Dubai. Dr. Ricky brings up brings with him a remarkable blend of professional excellence, entrepreneurial innovation, and social commitment. And just a brief about him. This is for our students. They should know what kind of speakers are coming to this platform. Therefore, I just want to introduce sir. His career began in the world of finance, where he served as a treasury chief dealer at Standard Chartered Bank, where he was recognized among top 10 employees in the Mesa region. Over the years, he has held several distinguished roles, including managing investment for the Office of the Ruler of Dubai, the National Bank of Dubai, and later serving as a chief investment officer of Al Hilal Bank. In these roles, he handled investment decisions of very significant scale and advised leading family offices and hedge funds on global financial strategies. Alongside his career in finance, he also been a very passionate entrepreneur and investor, enjoying where he enjoys building innovative business. In 2017, he founded North Ladder, a pioneering platform that introduces a reverse auction system for pricing used electronics. The startup went to become one of the top 5 startups in the region, recognized by the Village Capital, and successfully raised significant venture capital funding. He has also invested in several technology ventures spanning from AI, fintech, digital commerce, and climate technology. Beyond all these achievements, what truly defines Ricky sir is his deep commitment to social impact. He has been he has been part of founding teams of multiple internationally recognized charitable initiatives, including Manzil, an organization dedicated to the inclusion and empowerment of persons with disabilities. And academically, Sir holds an MBA from XLRI, Jamshedpur, and he has a lot of expertise through executive programs at Stanford, Wharton and Harvard Business School. Today, we are very fortunate to hear to someone who brings this powerful combination of professional success, innovation, and compassion for the society. So, on behalf of the staff and the students, and also the behalf of the management of Sathya Sai University, I welcome Sir to share his words in these wonderful words of wisdom.
Thank you, Dr. Chidambar. And please, everybody, don't believe everything he says because he's being too nice to me. I don't deserve such praise. But above all, I think we are all very blessed today to be together. First of all, I think all of you are really, really blessed to be in that environment which is fostering you, nurturing you, caring for you, looking after you, and which is doing such a huge impact upon so many young people across the world, not just within South India or India, but globally. I think the foundation is represented in over 100 countries now, from what Dr. Chidambar told me. So I think we're all really, really blessed to be in that in that framework, I would say, and in that pathway which is guided by love. So today's topic is something a bit different. It's not the norm, what people really talk about, because it deals with money. It also deals with how you use money, what you do with it, what kind of benefits or impacts it can have, which are negative. And I'll also bring in some of my own personal experiences as we go along this journey. I've taken the liberty to make it a bit more of a corporate look and feel by having a presentation also. So something which all of you will, as you grow older and as you are in life and in a work environment, you'll be going through, creating presentations, pitching your ideas to people, making people believe in what you want to talk about. So I deliberately adopted a different format for the talk today. So let me kickstart. So I'll talk a bit about my own journey. Uh, as Dr. Chidambar mentioned, my background spans three main verticals: investment management, entrepreneurship, and social impact. And by far, the proudest part of this has been social impact for me. When it came to managing money and handling money, I realized this was a very interesting commodity, a very interesting subject, because it had a lot of emotional connection with people, and I'll talk about that a bit later. Whether it was for an individual's wealth or whether it was for a bank or a family office, in an institutional capacity, anytime one deals with money, there is a give and take which is beyond the transactional nature of money. So investment management for me was about creating returns by managing risk and allocating capital to entities, setups, opportunities, which were as ethical as possible and with the right kind of purpose behind them. So, my last corporate role, I was a chief investment officer for an Islamic Sharia compliant bank in Abu Dhabi. So, I'll give you a small example. So, you might invest in a company, let's say, which makes lenses, right? So, lenses for your glasses or lenses for, medical equipment or whatever. But if that company also makes lenses for rifles, which enable you to see targets 1 kilometer away and you zoom into them, and then you shoot and kill somebody, something, an animal, whatever, using that rifle. So that's where the investment starts becoming non-Sharia compliant or unethical in some ways. So there was a lot of conversations we used to have around what is an ethical investment. So on paper, this company is making lenses, right? But where the lens is being used, where it is being applied, how it is being deployed, became the subject of discussion. So if you had a million lenses in a million eyeglasses for a million people, sure, that was great. But if you had lenses going into high-powered rifles, and those lenses were used to take a life, for example, then was that correct or not? Should one invest in that company or not? So I think it's important to have that conversation. The amount is not important. Where is the money going to? What is the reason behind that investment or that allocation or that particular task? That has to be probed a bit deeper. And I was very fortunate. I worked for the ruler of Dubai A lot of social development initiatives in the region, especially in the country, were kickstarted. And the thought process behind that was around social impact, around developing and building infrastructure, around making people's lives easier, better, nicer in some way or the other, right? Whether it was a bridge, whether it was a railway station, whether it was, food distribution networks, the supply chain efforts, all of these needed money to build and roll out. But they all solved a problem. They all tried to make our lives more frictionless. They all tried to make a difference. So those were the important tenets which I carried forward when I entered my entrepreneurial journey. One of the key things which I realized from my investment management journey was managing risk. You know, what is the return you're making? So let's say there are two portfolios or two people come to meet you. One person says, "Hey, I made 12% returns last year. Will you invest with me?" And the other person comes and says, "I made 6% returns. Will you invest with me?" So my question to you is, who is the better fund manager? Can anybody answer that? One person says 12%. The other person says, "I'll make 6%. So who should you give money to? What is the right answer? Anybody has any thoughts? It's not a trick question. It's a pretty straightforward question, but it has a very interesting answer. So two people approach you. They want to manage your money. One person says, "I'll give you 12% return per annum." And the other person says, "I'll give you 6% return per annum." Who is a better fund manager?
6%.
The 12% first guy, right? So he's a better fund manager. Okay. So that is one what we would assume, assuming that our objective was return enhancement. Now, when you try and get return, you are always exposing yourself to some risk, correct? So usually when you are expecting a higher return, you are also prepared for a higher risk. So if I tell you that the person who was giving you 12% returns was trading in the stock market where the volatility was 15% or 20% per annum, but he was only making 12% returns for you. However, the one who was giving you 6% returns was trading in the bond market or the fixed income market, right? Where he was lending and borrowing and trading the fixed income markets, where the volatility was much lower. Unlike the stock market, the volatility in the bond market was maybe 4%. So now you have two scenarios. There's a 15 to 20% volatile stock market in which you're making 12%. There's a 4% volatile bond market in which you're making 6%. Now, where would you invest your money now that you know this information? Does your answer change or does it remain the same? So we've got a higher return in one example, but a much, much higher risk, right? So if something is 20% volatile in a year and I am investing in that ecosystem, I should try and make more than 20%, hopefully. However, I'm making 12. But if something is only 4% volatile in a year, but I make 6%, then I'm doing a really good job in terms of managing money, right? So there's always a contextual understanding of returns when it comes to fund management. You have to always look at the risk undertaken behind that. You have to look at where the money is going, how it is being deployed, right? To finally understand and to arrive at a decision around investment management returns and your goals around that. So when we talk about entrepreneurship, the concept of risk becomes even more important. One thing which is very important in entrepreneurship is you need to be solving a problem, and hopefully it is a big problem, right? That is the cornerstone of any entrepreneurial effort, and we'll talk about that more in the slides coming forward. So you need to be solving something big. You need to be able to scale what you're doing, right? And you have to understand what is the solution you're adopting, what is the impact you're causing on the ecosystem around you, and is it an ethical framework you are working in? And the next slide, I'll talk a bit more about the guiding principles which guide me in life and which also apply to these three aspects of my own journey. Last but not the least, social impact. Here again, there are many ways to do social impact. One of the best ways I found out in the last 30 years was to convince somebody who was already very senior, already had a lot of money. And if we sat down and we talked to that individual, we created a framework for how to implement change, then one could get allocations which were sizable from people towards those social impact projects. And I went through a similar conversation 26 years ago. So I was in touch with a gentleman called RICKY Hussaini, who's probably the largest retail operator in the entire Middle East. 50,000 employees, just to give you an example, right? Called the Landmark Group. And I met him about 30 years ago in Dubai. And in the first few years, it was just a friendship. He was also not such a affluent and rich person at that time. I met him, I spoke to him, and we gave him a very interesting idea of rolling out homes where destitute children would be looked after by grandparents. So a home where a 70-year-old will live with a 7-year-old. And people who are in between the 30 to 50-year-olds had, ditched both these entities. They had left their children, they had left their parents. So both those segments were needing help. So we brought those two segments together, called it Our Home, and we set up a project called Landmark International Foundation for Empowerment, or LIFE. And Mickey was very, very sweet and very nice. Even though the entity was ready to go live in early January, he waited till my birthday, which was 24th January, and then he launched that social impact initiative, which really flourished over the years and did really well. Another initiative which I was involved in dealt with people with disabilities. So my wife's doctorate is in special education. In fact, her postdoctorate is in that field. And 21 years ago, in fact, 26 years ago, we started what was UAE's first support group to help families who had people with, Down syndrome, autism, attention deficit, hyperactive. All of us are different in different ways. All of us have our strengths and all of us have weaknesses. So the idea is to help people across the board. Some people need a bit more assistance, some people need a bit less, but we have to be tolerant, open, warm, and welcoming towards everybody around us. That was a key message I learned doing that whole project, because we tend to take things for granted, and only when you see adversity around you, when you see difficulties around you, when you see challenges around you, then you start becoming much more thankful, which is a much, much better place to be in. So being grateful, being thankful for what we have was my biggest learning through my social impact efforts. So Manzil, Touchwood, it was never a big setup. The idea was not to become big. The idea was to be the best we can be in what we're doing. And that's something which I think is very important in life. Yes, everybody will tell you, set some big goals, make a huge impact, make a lot of money, whatever it is, right? Just do it at huge scale. My philosophy is a bit different. Try to be the best at what you're doing. You don't have to be the biggest. Let's go back to our example of managing money. If I'm a money manager, if I can make 30% returns in a market where the volatility is 20%, I'm a great fund manager. Now, whether I manage 100,000 rupees or I manage 100 crore rupees is not as important. How I do the job to the best of my abilities from the information given to me, and I make the best value for my shareholders and the owners in that setup, that is far, far more important. Yeah, so that's the other thing which I wanted to share today. But let's move on. Let's come closer to our own core topic for today, which is dharmic capitalism. So what do you think are the three pillars for dharmic capitalism? I think the first one is quite obvious. Dharma, right? We want to do the right actions and conduct ourselves, and how we invest, where the money goes, right? It is done in the right way. So we follow the principles of dharma, of course. Arth, again, the wealth, it should have a purpose. This is very important. If you're talking about buying a share at 100 and selling it at 102, in my books, that's not dharmic capitalism. Sure, it's investment management, and I've done a lot of that in the past for organizations, and there's nothing wrong in that. But money can be used in a much, much more productive, impactful, and purposeful manner. So that's what would be ideal if one focuses on that or goes down a path where there's purposeful wealth creation. And obviously, the next one, right? So you have to look at service and service as a core of what you're doing. I think that's also extremely important. So these are the three pillars of dharmic capitalism. Anybody has any questions? Does it make sense? Is this something which aligns with your own thinking also? Today is an interactive session, by the way. It's not like I'm going to talk for 45 minutes and then maybe you'll ask some questions. Feel free to ask me any question, and that includes anybody who's in the management team, any of the teachers, Dr. Chidambar, please stop me anytime. No problem at all. Yeah. So does this make sense? So this is some of the key pillars I thought which we should talk about and which we should understand around dharmic capitalism. Some of my guiding principles, I think this is an important slide because these are principles which I try and incorporate in my life as much as I can. And the first one is try and stay close to the truth. You know, Satya is something very important. Try and be transparent. Try and sleep well at night. My father used to tell me that if I woke up in the morning and everything I did the previous day was printed in the tomorrow morning's newspaper, and he read that newspaper and he was not embarrassed by what Ricky had done the previous day, then that was a great life to lead, you know. So whatever you do, if you feel it can be printed the next day in the paper and everybody in the world can read about your actions. Now I know it sounds easy, but it's actually something very, very difficult. But this was one of the visual examples I used in my own life to try and follow as much as I could. That, hey, whatever I'm doing, be honest to yourself. So the important point around Satya is not Satya in just your expression to other people, but you have to be honest to yourself because you know at the end of the day what you have done, whether it has been good, bad, positive, negative. So the more closer we get to being true to ourselves, honest to ourselves, that is an important guiding principle for me. And I hope it also, makes you also think about those lines. Dan or generosity. Yes, you can embed generosity into your business model, but to me, it goes well beyond just business. The way we express ourselves, the way we communicate, the generosity which we have in terms of other people, their sentiments, their thoughts, their ideas, their wishes, their dreams. If we can be a bit more generous, just a slightly bit more generous, to accommodate them, to understand them, to make ourselves think about what they want, what they need. That is another big principle, I think, which is important for me. And that's why I'm sharing it with all of you today. Another principle I really like to follow is just try and avoid any kind of harm. Ahimsa is important. And it's not just a physical harm or a damage, right? It is manifested in so many different ways now. You could have something like cyberbullying, for example. People are online, but they are bullying other students, other children, older, younger, right? So it is harm. So harm to me is well beyond the physical harm. Unfortunately, today's world, we are seeing so much of physical harm happening across the whole world, which is impacting all of us. I'm sitting in Dubai and I'm having missiles and drones literally flying over my head. In the last 10 days, we have had about 270 missiles and 1,200 and plus drones, which have been intercepted above our skies by the amazing UAE military and the phenomenal government. But it is worrying, it is concerning, and ultimately lives are being taken across the planet to just fulfill people's individual gains more often than not. So to me, I think it's very important to try and adopt this as much as we can, right? And not just in terms of physically, but in terms of so many different ways in which we can stop harming the planet, our people, our society, right? So that's really a much wider view which I have around ahimsa, which I wanted to share with you today. And then we come to wisdom. Use your intelligence. Learn about the world. Don't just get caught up in what XYZ is telling you, right? Or if my neighbor is doing this, I should also do this. If everybody's saying, become a technology AI wizard, then I have to also become an AI wizard, right? Everybody, first of all, is not as smart as Dr. Chidambar to know AI, machine learning, signals, and all this kind of stuff, and to get selected at Carnegie Mellon University. Very few of us are in that intellectual league. But if we can read about the world, if we can learn about what's going on, and we keep our external antenna open, that's very important. And all this will help you when it comes to dharmic, capitalism or investments along the dharmic lines. Because unless you know where is the opportunity set, what is happening, you cannot predict, you cannot invest, right? And again, let's take an example of what has happened in the last 10 days, 12 days in the Gulf. So this was something which was brewing up. The war here was brewing up. And one obvious thing was supply and demand, right? So people thought that if there was a would remain, but oil supply would get curtailed. These countries would be at war with each other or fighting with each other, and the supply and distribution of oil would be much lower, which means that the price of oil would go up. Now, if you did not read about this, if you did not know about this, you probably missed out on an opportunity to invest in oil, buy oil today, and then sell it later when the price was higher, right? So for the last 1 month, oil prices were around $65, $70. But last week they went up to 120, right? Because this is what happened. So it's important to stay aware. That's the important thing. You should know what is happening around you, and then only can you construct ideas and opportunities and roll out concepts which can then, impact and make a just leverage that opportunity which is around you. And whilst doing that, also hopefully try and make impact on the ground in a socially beneficial manner. And last but not the least, don't be focused on the outcome. Again, very easy to say, very difficult to follow. To me, what I always try and do is I look at the non-commercial outcomes first. Is there a significant non-commercial outcome? Can I do something which is going to impact and make it better for people around? That would be something to me which is about or without attachments, so to say. So Nishkam Karma would link to trying and focusing on the range of benefits, because money will come. Money is not important as much as the impact which you make, the benefits which you make, and going back to the word I used earlier, making things frictionless. And I'll talk about my own experiences on the entrepreneurial side a bit linked to this particular guiding principle. So yes, unfortunately, life focuses a lot on money. And let me give you a small question. Your friend asks you to lend him 1,000 rupees. And there's another friend who asks you to lend him your bicycle. Which one would you be okay to do? Let's assume you have the money in your pocket and you also have a bicycle. Maybe you have 2 or 3 brothers and sisters. There are a couple of bicycles at home. Let's assume. And you have the option to lend somebody 1,000 rupees or lend somebody your bicycle. The bicycle, by the way, would be worth more than 1,000 rupees. So which one would you be more comfortable lending? Bicycle, right? And why do you say that? Because you've asked a very interesting, I'm thinking, why cash versus assets? So nobody likes to give money in a hurry, but people are happy to give an even more expensive asset to somebody else. Why? What is it about money which makes us feel anxious?
We value money a lot than physical
Yeah.
assets.
Yeah. So let me list down some thoughts around this, and I'm sure they will echo with what you're also saying. When it's cash, you lose control. You don't know where the funds are going, what they'll be used for. Maybe you lend money and somebody starts to do gambling with that. Somebody's buying alcohol with that, right? Somebody's doing something else which is negative with that. So I don't know. I'm losing control. When I give a bicycle, it's a bicycle, it stays a bicycle, it comes back as a bicycle, right? Objects which are linked to you and they have ownership stamp, that's a bicycle. But nobody's remembering the serial number of a 100 rupee note. It's gone. It's fungible, right? It's there in the ecosystem now, being deployed in some way or the other over which you have no control, right? And then what happens when you need to get it back? There's social awkwardness. Should I ask him to give me my money back? He said he'll give it back in a month. It's 6 weeks now. How do I deal with this? How do I cope with this? Right? And interestingly enough, the research shows that losses hurt us twice as more as what profits give us a feeling of goodness. So we feel bad more than 2 times compared to what we feel good when it comes to money. So that's another interesting research. So if we lose the money, it's twice as hurtful as, let's say, doubling the money, right? So this is human nature. And the way we return cash versus the way we return assets is totally different. It's quite clear. I gave you a bicycle, give my bicycle back, right? Maybe even clean it, fill up the tires with air and polish it and put the oil in the brakes and change the brake pads and then give it back, right? So it's in good condition. But I gave you cash. Was it a loan? Was it a favor? Does it become an investment? Is it being given for some other purpose? There are very different reciprocity norms around money. So it's very important to understand that there's a lot of emotional weight around money, as Dr. Chidambar said right in the beginning. So dealing with cash versus dealing with assets is something which impacts our psychological profile a lot more. And this is something which is important to understand when you're dealing with money, right? To me, I am over time less and less impacted by this difference. I actually feel blessed. If somebody asks me for money, I feel that's an opportunity for me to try and assist them. Yes, I would like to know where the money is going, ideally, and not going towards alcohol or gambling or other things, as I said. But even then, I don't feel, or at least I've trained my mind to start thinking more of money as a way to exchange something. It's not something which is just ours to control, just ours to make, just ours to use. There's too much of control around money in our own minds, in the way we talk to other people, and how we show the money which we have by fancy cars and fancy houses and fancy clothes. There's too much of importance which is attached to money. So I think sometimes it's good to step back and look at it as a mode of exchange rather than something which we spend all our lives trying to accumulate. you know Given a choice between accumulating happiness and accumulating money, everybody of any amount of wealth, when they are close to their deathbed, will say, I wish I was accumulating more happiness than accumulating more wealth. And yet we spend our lives running after that wealth. So it's very important to step back and think about these. Okay, I wanted to quickly move on to some different topics as well, because you guys are going into the future. You guys are going to get jobs. Most of them I know are also linked to the foundation, so which is a very nice blessing. But I took the liberty of, trying to break down what 3 factors really would combine to give you opportunities which are highest paying. First of all, entrepreneurial thinking. Think outside of the box. Solve a problem which needs solving, which is nobody's done before ideally, or which really makes things frictionless. Ability to scale, as I discussed earlier also, and to solve larger problems. Last but not the least, knowing how to leverage technology. Yes, it's nice to know how to code, but not necessary now. Now you have artificial intelligence helping us in this. And this is, as long as you know how to use technology and leverage technology, then you can, create and manage and do things. Let me give you a small example of something I did entrepreneurially. which was actually a world first. So the SAR swaps which you're reading is Saudi Riyal. So Saudi Riyal is the currency for Saudi Arabia. So the first online platform to trade Saudi Riyals from one date to another, like borrow Saudi Riyals today and lend it back to you after 3 months. Institutions do this all the time, right? Banks are borrowing and lending currencies to each other. So the first online platform in the world was built by me and my friend called Pishu Ganglani. And we did that in the late 1990s. This was 27 years ago. And we did something quite similar when both of us together in 2017 launched a company called Buyback Bazaar. And what Buyback Bazaar did was it gave you money for assets as a short-term loan, and then you could pay a little bit extra money and buy your asset back later. So let's say you wanted 1,000 rupees in 1 hour, and you don't want to ask your friends, you don't have a credit or debit card, but you need the money, and you have an old phone with you. So you could go to the platform, sell your phone for 1,000 rupees, and then a month later buy it back for maybe 1,020. So we disrupted the whole pawn industry. The whole industry, which is charging 20 to 30% per month, was disrupted by a simple platform which we built. And that platform has become one of the largest platforms in the region now. So there was the social problem we were solving was how do I access money without, you know, asking from my friends or being in a position of negativity or feeling bad about it, right? And also, I don't want to go to the Girvi market or the pawn market because the rates were too high. There were physical dangers. If I didn't, buy my asset back on time, somebody would come and knock on my door and say, "Hey, give me my money." Then what do I do? If my check is bouncing, the courts are following up on me, what do I do? So we were solving that problem, right? We used technology, we built a platform. It was entrepreneurial thinking outside the box, and that's why it became successful. Yeah. So I just wanted to give you a case study of my own life and how these principles help me to, address those problems. What I did was I put this simple question into an AI engine. I said, what will the 5 most lucrative jobs be, in the next 9, 10 years? And this is what came up: AI, personalized medicine, energy efforts, computing breakthroughs, and using finance in a creative manner. Then what I did was to the same engine, I said, instead of the most profitable jobs, let's change the question a bit. And I said, what are the 5 most impactful careers? Where can I make the most impact? And funnily enough, a lot of similar responses, you see? So the most impactful careers are going to solve 5 big global challenges: AI healthcare, clean energy innovations, smart agricultural, digital education, and working on climate prediction and disaster management, right? So look at the overlap. Let me go back a slide. So this is the most, well-paid jobs and careers to be in. And you see the commonalities between this and what we're doing in terms of the most impactful and where the global challenges are lying. So to me, making money and doing good can happen together. It's very important. We often link wealth accumulation with negativity. Oh, he's just running after money. That's not true. You can do good and you can make money together. And there are some great examples which I'll share later. But this is just something which I thought I'd share and get your insights as well. But to build this wealth, you need skills. Hard skills, STEM skills, technology skills, we all keep talking about. What are the other skills which you think are important? Anybody?
Interpersonal skills.
Interpersonal. What else? So communication is one skill. Anybody else from the team?
Soft skills.
Sorry, I can't hear that. What are they saying? Soft
Settling
skills.
soft.
Oh, perfect. I loved it. Who got access to my deck beforehand? This is a visionary group of students. They already knew my deck. Okay, even down to the words. So absolutely right. Actually, these are the most important ones. The soft skills are much more critical, and emotional intelligence is probably one of the most important ones. Everybody runs after IQ, but it's actually EQ which makes a huge difference. Small example: when I was doing my MBA at XLRI, there was somebody who was very good with people, but he was in the bottom 10% of the class when it came to marks. So he would sit and talk to you, understand you, great at playing the guitar, whatever else, but intellectually, marks wise, sorry, really struggling. So we used to often wonder, how did he get into XLRI after such a difficult entrance examination? But guess what that person was doing 30 years later? Take a wild guess. Well, you can't guess, so I'll tell you. He was global head of human resources for a company which had operations in 55 countries. Global head of HR. Yeah. His salary every month was $100,000 times 90 in terms of rupees. So this was somebody who got the bottom 10% of marks in our MBA exam, in our MBA course, but he was very good at dealing with people, right? So you have to figure out and you have to build skills to understand what motivates others. Anything you do in life, you have to make people believe in your own objectives. And the best way to do that is to first understand what motivates them. If you understand what motivates people, then you can position your own ideas, your own projects, your own pitches, your own desires, your own hopes accordingly, right? So spend time on EQ. Very important. Communication, as you rightly said, you have to learn how to pitch. And when you're pitching, it's not just about a pitch deck to some VC for some investment idea for a startup. We are pitching 10 times a day. When you don't want to go to school and you're talking to your parents in the morning and saying, oh, my back is paining, you're pitching. You're pitching because you want to stay at home. You want to bunk school, right? Then you get into school, you get into college, you're pitching. If you want to become the head boy, head girl of school, or head of your class, or head of your community, or head of your political party, head of the country, everywhere you're pitching at every level. So it's very important that you understand how to pitch and you develop and build those skill sets. Yeah, this is something very practical, which I'm talking about. And last but not the least, you need to build resilience, right? This is very important. Life is never going to be easy. There is somebody repaying a bicycle loan, there's somebody repaying a plane loan. So, both have taken loans and they're both stressed. They both have problems, they both have issues, but you have to be resilient. You have to stay the distance. That's important. So to build wealth, ultimately, these skills are very critical. You have to understand what motivates others. You have to know how to communicate your own ideas in a way which is crisp, focused, and makes people decide in your favor. And ultimately, life will throw all kinds of negativities at you. You have to stay resilient, right? So these are the important things which I have learned over the last 30 years, and hopefully they will add value to you also. But let's go back to rural India now. Something quite interesting, something which I find a huge opportunity, absolutely, and something which all of you are also involved in and interested in, and will hopefully go back to. You've come from there and you go back and make a difference there. And I thought I'll put down some of the opportunities in rural India. And I'm sure if I ask you this, come on, let's hear from some of you. What kind of opportunities do you think exist back in rural India? Who's going to answer this for me? Okay, there's one specifically around ladies, and I know there are a lot of ladies here today also. So come on. What can ladies in rural India do which can be monetized?
Okay, I'll begin. I
Yeah,
would say
sure.
rural healthcare data set.
All right. Excellent. Rural healthcare. Awesome. What else?
Agriculture.
Agriculture. Amazing. Absolutely right. What else? One more I need. Come on.
Self-empowerment. Self-empowerment.
Self-empowerment. Yes, absolutely. In fact, India has got like 12 million self-help groups. A lot of them, there's national level body also handling that. But you're absolutely right, spot on. So obviously, digital healthcare is a big one. Preventive medicine, accessible rural healthcare, smart agriculture, as you rightly mentioned. Water, crop usage optimized. Even things like crop insurance would come under this, and ultimately getting higher income for farmers. Education, a big one. right? Ultimately leading to employment pathways. So, and again, all of you are great examples of this. You went down the educational path, you've understood and learned things, and now you're going back into the employment journey after this, right? So, who else better than you to know this? Financial inclusion, another big one, access to credit, building economic stability at a family level, at an individual level. And this is another big takeaway. It was empowerment, as you rightly said. And another big one is renewable energy, right? So sources of energy are there in different ways. It's not just about, solar plants. And I was very fortunate, in fact, one of the companies I invested in rolled out India's first solar desalination plant, solar thermal desalination plant. I think that was 16, 17 years ago in South India. But these are the key opportunities. So if you're learning anything along these lines, if you're training for this, then that's amazing. I think the other important thing to look at and understand is the technology part of all these. A lot of times you go back into the rural world, there are opportunities without, or let's say low tech dependent opportunities. What would they look like? So I thought I'll put in a slide to make you think about these. So for example, opportunities which are more need based, right? There's a need on the ground. You don't have too much of competition. You're one of the first people who are solving that problem, right? There's no competition because people don't want to go to the rural side as much. They all want to focus on the Delhis and Bombays and Chennais of the world, right? So you have a low competition when you're focusing there. You have policy support. The government has so many frameworks supporting the rural side. So you can leverage that, you can take advantage of that. There are far lesser policy supports in urban environments than they are in rural environments. Most importantly to me, meaningful. They are touching the lives of people who are struggling on the ground, who have difficulties and challenges on a daily basis, and for whom 100 rupees is the same as 10,000 rupees for somebody in a Delhi or a Bombay, right? So it's much more meaningful. And ultimately for you as an opportunity builder, it's profitable. So you are going to make money. So not only are you having all these things in your favor, you can make money from it as well. And what would be some of these opportunities, let's say? So as we said, farming, collectives, farm to customer supply chains, bring products directly from the land to the customer's table. Organic, obviously agriculture is a big one. Skilled tradespeople, electricians, plumbers, carpenters, masons. There's a huge demand for skilled people across the world, and it's easy to build frameworks and vocational training centers which roll out such people, get them accredited, get them certified, and then they can find jobs anywhere in the world. In fact, imagine a place like Dubai, where about 30% of the population is skilled tradespeople who came and built the city, literally. At one point, Dubai had 26% of the world's cranes in one city. So if there were 100 cranes in the world, 26 were sitting in Dubai. That's a small place. At that time, only 2 million people, right? But 26% of the world's cranes were sitting here. And all these people, electricians, plumbers, carpenters, masons, made a whole difference. Elder care, this is another big one. And in the next few years, we'll have more than 200 million people in India above 60. There's no culturally sensitive elder care. People will need companionship services. There will be assisted living. People on their last mile, we need palliative care. So a lot of opportunities, which are all low tech dependent and in the rural landscape. So I wanted to share these with you so all of you start thinking about your future, thinking about which areas you're keen on going into, where you can apply your knowledge, what resonates with you. What am I doing now from my EQ side? I'm trying to understand what motivates you. So I want you to think about these things, right? Going back to the ladies, artisans and cultural heritage. There are so many communities making all kinds of different things, whether they're in South India or Rajasthan or wherever, right? Rajasthan has become quite famous internationally for so many arts and crafts which are now sold globally. So again, if you create platforms which can take the artisan's product from the ground, sell it internationally directly, and pass on majority of the benefit to the artisans, that's amazing, right? That's that's what the white movement was, which Korean did in milk and Amul and all that, right? Just got so many people involved at the grassroots level and built frameworks and built collectives to get them access to bulk of the revenues and bulk of the profits. Excuse me. So that's another one. Sanitation, another huge one in the rural side. Water management, right? There are so many startups and NGOs involved in river restorations, involved in rainwater harvesting, involved in water storage. Again, a community-based initiatives. All of these are low-tech dependent. And yet, as I mentioned earlier, there's a need on the ground, it's profitable, it's easier to access because you've grown up, you understand that landscape better than anybody else can. And most importantly, as it's it's something where there's low competition. People are not running after the same apple. There are lots of apples and very few people to eat them. So there's a lot of low-hanging fruit sitting in rural India. And this is just one slide I made. I could think of 5, 7 other initiatives, but just I wanted you to start thinking about these different options. So it helps you to shape your own career, your own thought process. Important one from Bhagavad Gita, said by Lord Krishna to Arjun at the Battle of Kurukshetra, when basically he wanted to stop killing people. And yet the idea was, do not escape action, purify your intention. You have a duty, you're a warrior. Your duty is to do something, do it to the best of your abilities with the right intention. And that in itself is the best way to lead a life. So I think this was something which resonated a lot with me, which resonated with entrepreneurship as seva, and also around the whole concept of dharmic capitalism. And entrepreneurship guided by dharma can actually become seva at scale. So making money is great as long as it's driven by the right dharmic principles. And then you can really incorporate that and do seva for a lot of people at scale and make a lot of difference on the ground. So this is something I wanted to share as we get closer towards this conversation of ours. And my last question to you was, what will your own legacy be? Are you going to be like Jamsetji Tata? Imagine 2/3 of their company is owned by the foundation. Verghese Kurian, whom I mentioned earlier, give power to the people it serves. Aziz Premji did a lot of stuff on technology, but ultimately a lot of wealth pledged towards education. And, the other technology pioneer with compassionate capitalism. So what will your own legacy be? Where do you see yourselves 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the road? Spend some time with yourself. It's very important. We don't do enough of that. I think it's important to be silent, to meditate, to think about what makes you happy. What would you want to do if suppose somebody looked after your food and your shelter and you did not get any money even? What would something which you love to do, what would that be? So yes, my daily needs are looked after. I get food and I get shelter. Now let's work 12 hours a day. What will that job entail? So you got to ask yourself that. And everybody is different. And don't get pressurized by people around you, please. It's very okay to say, maybe some of you will say, I want to go to the city, and I want to work in a technology company in America. That's fine. There's nothing wrong about that. But the better you understand yourselves, the more you'll be aligned with what you're doing in life, right? So a couple of important dharmic capitalism promises. Build something that matters, be involved in something that matters. Ethics is very important. Your own reputation is critical. It could take you 20 years to build a reputation and 2 hours to lose it. So you have to be really focused on keeping ethics as a guiding principle around your own lives and give at whatever stage you can. Don't wait till your Bill Gates and is, opened the Gates Foundation and then started donating. The idea is to give in whichever ways. You might just go and get some water for somebody who's, not feeling too well. That's giving. The gesture of helping others, that triggers the whole ability to do that at scale. So you need to reach out inside and be happy to serve as a student, as an intern, as an employee, as a founder, and then subsequently as a leader. And all of these people give back in different ways. Students give so much to professors and teachers, and I'm sure Dr. Chidambar will resonate with that. We all learn as we grow older, and we learn from people around us, right? So I learned so much when I spoke to him yesterday, not just about the foundation, but about so many other things in life which are important. So this is some of the promises which you have to make, in this conversation, in this whole journey. Final reflections. take some time to think over these, please. This is something which I think is important, and I want you to focus on these, and I want you to master your own mind. As I said, spend some time being silent. Spend some time on yourself. Learn to discipline your mind. Otherwise, you'll always be running from pillar to post, thinking in a scattered manner. You'll not be able to focus. You'll not be able to apply yourself to something. So spend time on your own mind. Yeah. The word in Hindi is sthirta, or English is equanimity. Build sthirta in yourself. And the only way you can build it is by trying to master your mind. Yeah. One of the guiding thoughts around meditation. So I remember when I went for Vipassana, this was the biggest thing. And the one biggest line which we learned was, this too shall pass. Whether it is happiness, whether it is sorrow, they all come and they all go. Don't let them impact you so much. Let your mind stay as calm as it can, because a calm mind is a mind which can really be efficient, work well, make a big impact, and make its own body happy. That's the important takeaway from a calm mind. Live life with a purpose, not just an ambition, you know. So what do you want to do? To me is such a weird question, because people will often link it to some financial goal, some job title. I want to be CEO of an MNC company, or something like that. And to me, again, try and be the best at what you're doing and live life with a purpose. You don't have to be the biggest CEO in the world and manage the highest money in the world and always run after those kind of ambitious goals, but live for ambitious purpose, not ambitious commercial goals, but ambitious purpose goals. Present moment is all you have. Don't lose it. Don't squander time. Don't just sit around and do nothing and think, okay, fine, I've got 50 years more in my life. You never know when is our last day, our last moment, right? So life is unpredictable. We have to be grateful for what we have, and we have to make the most of every moment. And this is something which I have coined. I haven't heard anybody else look at it, but try and get your own coefficient of happiness as close to one as you can. So find out what makes you happy. What triggers, you to do good things, because I feel I'm happy when I serve others. I'm happy when I build something unique. I'm happy when my professor says, hey, that's a creative answer. I'm happy when I make money. you know I'm happy when whatever makes you happy, you have to drill down and focus on that. So that becomes the guiding principle. The more, you remember when you, right? So unless we look after ourselves, God helps those who help themselves. So we have to look after ourselves first. Unless we are happy, we cannot make other people happy, right? So this is something very important, I feel. And the more you understand yourselves, the more you can make yourself happier, and your life will be much more purposeful, and you will get a lot more of returns than just financial returns. And last but not the least, nothing beats getting it done. Small anecdote: I was with National Bank of Dubai. I was probably the youngest head of investments for the bank when I was, I think, 33. And this was the largest bank in the Middle East in those days. So the top 10, 15 people in the bank were invited for a 2-day presentation by a Harvard Business School professor of banking. So this 65-year-old guy came in from the US. I think we paid him $30,000 per day, in those days. So that was a lot of money, right? So it was like, what, 25 lakhs for that per day we were paying that professor. And he came in and he dismissed us in the first 10 minutes saying, we don't know anything about banking. And our CEO was quite, psyched. And all of us said, oops, he's just slapping us around. So he said, you guys don't know anything about banking. And then he asked us why. He said, why do you think I'm saying that? So we didn't have an answer. So we said, please tell us. So he said, I have spent more than 6 hours with more than 300 bank CEOs. Now I know what the CEOs think, how they plan, how they change strategy, how they look at markets, how they look at pricing, how they look at competition. And he asked our CEO, he said, how many CEOs have told you their business plan for the next 3 years? And our CEO said, well, none. Why would a competitor tell me his business plan? And he said, but they've all told me because I'm from Harvard. I'm not competition. So as a result, over those 3 decades he was consulting, he picked up so much of knowledge about how to run a bank. And he told us that in the services industry, 90% of success is all about, what's the last line? Implementation. He says there is no CEO in the world who does not have some 3-year business plan, goal, mission, strategy, target, objective, blah, blah, blah. He said, unless you know how to implement it, well, you are not going anywhere. The bus is not going to any right place unless there are the right people on it. Right? The same concept. If you give peanuts, you'll get monkeys. Right? So the same concept. You have to have implementation skills. You have to get there because everything else is immaterial. And that's where resilience comes in, going back from our previous concept which you talked about. We are finishing up on time. I think I just have one last thing to share, and that's one of my favorite 1-minute videos. This was done by Apple, but please enjoy and listen to it carefully.
Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. But the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. There's the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world, ones who do.
So, thank you so much, everybody. It
Thank you,
was
sir.
very wonderful to catch up with you and to share my thoughts. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes,
I
sir.
hope what I've shared adds value to you. I'll be happy to share the deck with you also, Dr. Chidambar. So
Sure.
if anybody wants to see it, they can go ahead on that. But
We
thanks
have
once
few
again.
questions. I
Absolutely.
have two
Please
questions.
shoot.
Yeah. In institutions like us, which are engaged in large-scale charitable activities like healthcare, education, and humanitarian work, finance becomes a important pillar. At same time, we are not profit-driven organization. In this context, how should we students think about finance? Should we see it as a merely as a resource to sustain operations, or what should be our mindset, and what should be the mindset of leaders of such charitable institution so that they can adapt and deal with finance while remaining aligned with thermic capitalism?
I think the important thing here is accountability. So if you're talking to any corporate entity or any high net worth individual, anybody who wants to help you financially, you have to demonstrate transparency and accountability around how those funds are being used. So that's an important aspect of the overall NGO management concept, which I know you have a course on also. So the financial transparency, the accountability, telling people that there will be KPIs which you will report to them on, which they are happy to come and visit. That, hey, I promise to give you 5 crore rupees to set up this wing in a hospital. Please come and see how that is being deployed. Come during the construction period of time, to do that. So any of those things is something very important to look at from the purpose of using money. So the financial part has to be linked to accountability, transparency. Those are the two most important takeaways. And then the third most important one is sustainability. That once somebody sees that what they have given is making a difference on the ground, and is actually impacting people on the ground. The next time around, when you go to them and say, hey, remember we worked together on that particular hospital, we need to open another one in another place, then they know that you will be doing a good job. You will be implementing and using the funds in the right way. It will not just go towards administrative expenses, or it will not just go towards building a big team or unnecessary marketing expenses or unnecessary waste of that money. So you want to create frameworks which are as sustainable as possible. And I know sometimes it's a challenge because, for example, if you're offering free medical care, it's difficult to bring in fiscal independence. And, that's the challenge. But there are other things which can be done, which create independence. So, for example, you could be training other NGOs on how to deploy funds or how to use funds, how to bring in transparency and accountability around that. There are various different things which your organization, being literally a global leader in this, like for example, you're serving meals to 1 crore children, right? The nutrition aspect of that. So maybe you spend time and effort on tweaking a small thing, but the impact is much more wide-reaching. So for example, Manzil, the center which I was part of the startup team for 21 years ago, we are run like a not-for-profit, but it's also a business. We charge people for the services we provide. So we don't overcharge. We try and optimize that, and we use budgeting, balance sheets. We use different sources of funding. Lots of times funding is in kind. So for example, in your school, right, you want to teach them robotics, let's say, right, which is tomorrow's trend. Now, one option would be to ask somebody, hey, can you give me 50 lakh rupees for a robotics lab? Somebody else might say, hey, but let's go to that other school, twice a month, which has a robotics lab, and ask them, can we come at 5 o'clock in the evening, and use the lab for an hour? Or can we come on a Saturday and use your lab for an hour, because we were offering it for children who are from the villages or who need that assistance, right? So you create different sustainability pathways as a result. You leverage existing ecosystems. You can be like a hub and spoke model. So your hub is where you do the expenses. The spoke is where you tap into other people's resources, other people's infrastructure, and then provide a holistic solution back into the spoke. So like robotics lab in another school would be a spoke, but the benefits are coming to people in the hub without spending that money. So I hope
Yes,
that answers that question.
yeah. Yeah, one more question from the audience. Today, world appears increasingly volatile, and as we are speaking, I know in downtown Dubai, a lot of drones are intercepted. So, amidst this conflicts, war, and economic uncertainty, and social divisions in many parts of the world, as students, how should we understand the future, and how should we look at such situation? And from your perspective, as someone who has worked deeply in global finance, do you believe the philosophy of one world, one family can realistically work in today's chaotic world?
I think it's a desperate need of the hour for that philosophy, first of all. Ultimately, what happens on the ground is the collective decision making of all of us who are involved in that ecosystem. So if more and more people come from a mindset which practices that philosophy, that one world philosophy, that dharmic approach, that seva approach, if we are softer as people, if we are more tolerant as people, if we understand other people's mindsets and how they work, and we're going back to different parts of our presentation in this answer, if we all develop a higher emotional intelligence, if, like, for example, religion, if we are just more understanding of everybody else's faith, less critical of other people, and understand the benefits and the pluses and the positives of every religion, ultimately there's so much of common positives across all religions, right? So I think for us, the less discord we have, the more tolerant we are, the more understanding we are. And those are the principles by which I know your own education has happened. And in this case, I'm probably reminded of Mark Twain's famous quotation, I don't let my schooling interfere with my education. So schooling is 7 plus 4 is 11, but education is interreligious tolerance, being patient with people, being understanding, being giving, focusing on seva, focusing on happiness, focusing on love. This is what the core tenets of education, which all of you are, surrounded with, touch wood. And that's why, again, I'm going back to my opening line. I feel we're all very, very blessed to be in that space, to be in that ecosystem. And as a result, anywhere we go in life tomorrow, we will bring those values to the table. We will bring those filters to the conversations, to the decisions, which result in negativity or positivity. And that's where I hope, we all become much more educated and not just focus on, hey, I've got a class 12th degree or a graduate degree or a master's degree. To me, the education part becomes far, far more important than the schooling part. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Very nice. So I take a privilege, liberty of asking question. I have a question. So
Please.
sometimes what I observe within myself and also peers whom I work is when we think about large scale projects, we struggle to think at scale because money becomes one of the limiting factor, and it creates hesitation and even fear in taking up such bold initiatives. However, when we see leaders like you and of course leaders like Sadhguru Madhusudan Sai, who is able to envision and execute such massive humanitarian projects, it seems that they think differently about resources and possibilities. So, from your experience, how should we young people or people who are in budding stage, overcome this mental barrier regarding money and scale?
I think the starting point is to break down things to first principles. The KISS principle, keep it simple and stupid, right? How will I educate 10 students in a makeshift classroom in a village? How do I scale that up to 100 students? How do I then make it a proper school with proper bricks and ceiling? How do I get students from other villages to come and get transported so that they can be a part of that school? And now it's becoming a school with 1,000 kids in it. And now how do I export that model to the next village? And then the village after that? And then the 5 villages around me, and then the next district, and then the next state, and then 100 countries, as you have been to. So I always like to start small. It's good to fail fast. This is one of the key tenets of entrepreneurs. And in this example, in some ways, greed is important. And greed is not just about lust for money. It's greed to be doing something bigger. It's greed to make an impact. It's greed to make a difference, right? It's greed to scale up something. So words have inherent connotations in our own minds, but they are actually, to me, words which can be applied in many other different ways, right? When we say somebody's greedy, it's a negative connotation straight away. But Madhusudan Sai might have a greed for social impact at a global scale. That's his burning desire. That's his ambition. That's his greed, right? That's what drives him. That's what motivates him. That's what he's passionate about, right? So you have to find out where your passion lies. That's important, because unless you are aligned, unless your life is aligned with what makes you happy and what you're passionate about, you'll not be successful. As you've read, finish 10,000 hours doing something before you even think of calling yourself an expert, right? That's what the textbooks say. So you have to figure out what is something you'll do for 10,000 hours without worry for any kind of monetary compensation, right? So end goal is not important from a commercial perspective. But what is that thing? If I feed you and if I give you a roof over your head, you'll do 10,000 hours of that. That's what you will ultimately land up being super successful at, super visionary at, and you will make an impact on the ground and make a difference on the ground. So I think that's the important way to look at it. Start small, break it down. It doesn't have to be big. Like I told you before, be the best at what you're doing. Maybe one of those 10 students in that school joins IIT. I don't know. And that would be one of the best things you could do on a rural education level, but at a small scale. So the quality of inputs are so good that every individual is meaningfully impacted over time, right? So would you have that quality for 10 people versus a poor quality for 100 people? To me, no questions about that. It doesn't have to be big, but it has to be really good, right? Setting up a medical facility. Do you want to just provide, below average medical healthcare to 100 people, or to make a big difference to 10 people's lives who walk through the doors, right? So that quality aspect, cannot be, ignored. And you have to have, dreams, and you have to have hope. I'm reminded of a quotation. What is hope? Hope is the dream of a waking man. So, hope is in your minds. It's the dream of a waking man. As you're waking up, and the dream is just slipping out of your mind. That's reminds me of hope. So, keep your hopes alive, keep your dreams alive. And, the things which don't let you sleep, or the things which, make you happy and keep you awake at night, or make you go to office in the morning feeling happy and excited, right? Those are the things you should spend your own life doing, rather than just following what the herd is saying and the herd is advising or the herd is telling you to do. I think that's one of the key messages from our talk today. So,
Yes,
thanks.
sir. Thank you very much. I think there are so many insights from today's session. Personally, I feel after every such talk, I find myself immersed in my notes. So my iPad is full of notes. I'm like that Harvard consultant who is learning from all big bankers. It's as you said, I feel we require time to assimilate. A lot of very deep conversations has happened, and it is definitely a privilege for us to learn some to learn from you who has built, managed large systems. And people often say this who have like people who have worked closely with money and capital will understand deeper nuance of human personality. So listening to you may, has made us
And,
feel that statement real.
and like I said, just try and be as good as you can in whatever you're doing. I mean, we started
Yeah.
Manzil 1 years ago. It is not a big setup, but we got invited to present at the UN headquarters in Vienna. You
Mm.
know, our founder presented in front of about 600 ministerial level delegates from across the world, and our program was then adopted and, conceptualized, and the frameworks were shared to dozens of non-profits across the world. So, and that was a huge thing for us because, what we learned in our journey, people did not need to spend 5, 10, 15 years learning that. They would just, start with that model and go ahead and execute. So, and that's what the importance of trying to be the best at what you can is all about, I think. And
Yeah, that's an important point. Like as you said, coefficient
you
of
have to have that
happiness.
passion. You have to focus
Yeah,
on things that make you happy. You have to work towards that then, and keep your goals simple to start with. Don't break your head over something astronomically difficult. You might have a long-term vision to get there, but the more simple and easier your goals are step by step, right? Then it's easier to achieve them. You feel good as you have successes along the way, and some failures also, sure. But as long as your successes are a bit more than your failures, then you're always growing. You're always improving. So I
yes,
think to me, the word can't doesn't exist in the dictionary. You know,
yeah,
it's in our minds. So the more we tell ourselves that yes, I can make it happen. Sure, it might take more time, might take more assistance, more resources, but there's no concept of a can't, right? So that's another important fundamental principle I think we should all
yeah.
try and believe in and try and fight for and try and make it happen in our own lives at our own abilities, at our own scale, at our own comfort levels, but to the best of what we can do, right?
I loved this, and especially I loved that 10,000 hours of expertise. That given
Yeah.
a shelter, given a roof,
What
you
would
would,
we, yeah, exactly. What would you just do? Ask yourself that question.
yeah,
If it aligns with any one of these strategic areas where development is happening in rural India or in non-rural India, and it aligns with that, it's in sync with that, it's in sync with people's own background. Somebody's doing an engineering background, somebody's doing social work, somebody's doing, psychology, whatever it is, if it aligns with that, then you know that strategically, long-term wise, there is a movement coming behind you. You're going to ride that wave, you know.
yeah.
A
Sadhguru actually,
rising tide lifts all
yeah,
ships. So if you
mm,
are along with that strategic rising tide, in one of those verticals, then all the ships will get lifted along with that tide. So that's the
yeah,
importance of looking outward, understanding the future, looking at the future of work, looking at what sectors are growing, what is developing. Once you have those conversations with people who are in the marketplace, with 3, 4, 5 people, and you align, you understand that better, and then you say, I'm studying X, Y, Z, that aligns with this. Now I know where to focus on. I'll be passionate about that. I'll put in my 10,000 hours on that very happily, right?
Yeah.
And then you see long-term success and long-term happiness and fulfillment ultimately.
Yes, sir. Actually, Sadhguru calls this as Swadharma, that each one of us are born to do something. If we discover that, then human excellence happens.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we hope that all of us discover that and
Yes. The idea is
build
to try.
ourselves. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you, sir. We pray for Dubai. We pray for the peace at Dubai and
Yeah.
hope world
Pray for
comes
peace.
more closer together as one world and one
Really
family.
need that. We really need that. And congratulations to you and the entire team for fostering that amongst the
Yeah.
youth, the ground, and I hope and pray as well that the principles by which everybody's growing up and learning get cascaded into the real world as and when they go out and interact with the rest of the world around them. So all the
Yes, sir.
best. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Please visit us whenever you are in India.
We'll try to do so for sure.
Sure. Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you. Bye, everybody.
We'll end with Sahana Bhavatu.
Please. Thank you.
Yeah. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Punaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavati Tamastu Ma Vidvishavai Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you, sir.